Rising home prices in South Korea have been a contentious issue for years, and so it's almost with a sense of disbelief that homebuyers have watched prices soar during the pandemic. That comes despite efforts by the government over the past couple of years, which include 26 rounds of policies to cool down the market. People in other countries have seen something similar in the pandemic. So what's driving prices higher, both in Korea and around the world? Our Kim Sung-min has been looking into the issue for us, and she joins us this afternoon here in the studio. Sung-min, good to have you back on.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, the Moon administration realized this was an issue a couple of years ago and started taking action, as I mentioned. Young people especially started to feel that the price of homes just put them out of their reach, especially watching prices go up in the pandemic. So give us a sense of how expensive homes are in Korea and how much they've risen.
Devin, before we start, I'd like to say that when we discuss the price hikes in the South Korean housing market, it's more accurate to limit that to the capital area. The house price gap between the Seoul area and the rest of the country is huge, and most of the market frenzy has been concentrated in and around the capital. According to a report by KB Bank, the price of apartments in the capital area during the first half of this year increased by almost 13%, the biggest rise in 19 years. And that has been driven mostly by the high-end houses. Last month, the average price of the top 20% of homes reached over $970,000. That's a jump of around 30% compared to a year ago. To give you a better picture, I visited one of the most expensive apartments in Banpo, Seoul. Here, just last month, a home with 84 square meters unit of usable space was sold for $3.5 million US dollars. That's the highest price on record for an apartment of this size. If we break down the total space, that works out at more than $30,000 for 1 square meter.
Sung-min, for our American viewers, to put this into perspective, I can speak from that point of view. That's getting close to what, $3,000 a square feet, which is around 10 or 20 times what you would see in a typical American town or city. So, and this is something we've seen in many other countries too. Data just recently showed that the average American home price went up 25% in the last year.
Right, house prices are an issue all around the world right now. When we take a look at the data from the Bank for International Settlements, global property prices rose by 4% on year in the fourth quarter of 2020 when the pandemic was raging across borders. And the surge was more apparent in advanced economies. Real house prices across the OECD rose by 7% on average from the fourth quarter of 2019 to the fourth quarter of 2020. As you can see from the graph, that was the fastest growth over the past 2 decades. Some of the hottest markets were New Zealand, with real prices rising 13%, followed by Canada at 11%. The US also saw price hikes of 8%, and the UK and Europe both 6%. So in that term, South Korea's rise seemed relatively mild, standing at 3%, but that's partly because it was buffered by the regions outside the capital area. The BIS noted that although a rise in house prices during a recession is not unprecedented, recent increases have been unusually large.
Well, indeed, they have. They're rising all over the world. In the American market, we know that one factor has been an increase in material prices, especially lumber. That's made it more expensive to build new houses, and in turn, that means used houses have also become more expensive. But I know there are deeper reasons for this as well. So help us understand what's behind the rise in home prices.
Well, experts have largely given 2 reasons to explain the surges. The first one would be how the pandemic has driven down interest rates to historic lows. Policymakers around the world have cut interest rates by 2 percentage points on average last year, which in turn reduced the cost of mortgage borrowing. And that monetary policy to boost the economic recovery, combined with trillions of dollars in physical stimulus, led demand to outstrip supply in many countries, just like here in South Korea.
After the pandemic, because Korea wanted to try to reduce the shock from the pandemic, Korea, along with most other countries, carried out a very expansionary monetary policy with low interest rate and high liquidity. And that's been feeding into the real estate market as well as stock market, cryptocurrency market.
Right, all kinds of assets. I mean, it makes sense that if it's cheaper to borrow, then that'll be reflected in a rise in prices. But there's more to the pandemic story than that. What else is going on?
Well, another reason that many experts mention is the increase in demand. With the lockdowns and the reduced opportunities to spend, those who manage to keep their jobs turn to property and, to be more precise, a nicer house. As the COVID-19 pandemic led more people to work from home, homes became their offices, schools, and gyms. So while the demand has increased, the supply couldn't keep up with that in many countries, including the U.S.
Housing production has been unusually slow, even coming out of the crash. So it's been at low levels, and there are different reasons for it. Some of it is it's become more expensive to build houses. Lumber prices have gone up. There's some shortages of certain types of labor. So it was the case even before this that house prices were growing faster than inflation, but not quite as much.
Right, okay, that makes sense. Let's look forward for a minute. Those who need to buy homes are most likely going to continue to buy homes, but it'd be nice to know under what conditions they'll be buying them. So tell us what factors are at play going forward and what might be in store.
Well, Devin, no one can really predict what's going to happen exactly, but we can consider various factors like potential rate hikes to at least guess the scenario. Experts say the overheated market is bound to fall as a housing bubble pops.
House prices will not go up forever. By 2025, the interest rates will be higher. Whether it is the US or Korea, the rate will grow by some 2.2 percentage points through the next 3 years. Then the tapering will come and liquidity will be reduced. The house prices by then will overshoot. And when the supply increases with the current government plans, there's a higher chance that the price will start falling.
Obviously, the big question is it going to be a bubble or is it going to revert back to some sort of average? The bets are on the latter. Of course, the former is a risk. The markets, again, are betting that if you look in the bond market, it's making bets that inflation will go down, that it won't be as high as it is now. Because if they weren't making that bet, interest rates would be higher. And they're just not high enough to be consistent with expectations of inflation.
Well, so, I mean, it sounds like there are some temporary factors at play, maybe some longer factors at play. But if prices do keep rising, it sounds like maybe they won't do so at the rate they have been, and at least that would be some sort of relief to people who are hoping to get on the property ladder. So, I mean, very thorough reporting today. Always appreciate that. A very interesting topic. Look forward to having you again next time.
Thank you.